Class 5 motions are twisting motions, and these are motions you want to avoid completely, both for you and for your assistant. And there's a lot of Class 5 twisting motions that go on. Here's an example, and you actually if you look up endodontists on their website actually working, you will see a lot of Class 5 motions. It's especially true of the assistant, where motions are very, very uncomfortable. So it raises a question. Why are endodontists working this way? Why would anyone work this way? I've come up with about 9 reasons. Number 1, they don't think it's necessary, or they don't understand the advantages of doing everything under the scope. Or they may not realize that it's even possible to do everything under the scope. Or maybe they're happy and successful without making any kind of a change. They have long-term staff, they're very profitable, their overhead is low, and they don't have any physical or health issues. So they don't want to change anything. I can understand that. Or maybe they'd like to change but think it's too difficult. It's just too hard to do everything under the scope. Or one of the biggest reasons, they mistakenly believe they are more efficient, because it is a mistake to think you are more efficient. There is no way you can be as productive moving the scope around and doing some things with the scope and others without. It's a very inefficient way to work. It may be that people want to work more efficiently, but actually don't know how. Maybe they haven't been exposed to this way of working. And then maybe they're just plain stubborn. Maybe they want to work differently, but don't want to change anything about the way they're already working. And lastly, maybe they just don't want to make the effort. They're just plain lazy and don't see it as anything they want to make any effort about. So what can I fix and what can't I fix? Well, I can't fix lazy. I can't fix stubborn. I can't fix fat, dumb, and happy. If you're happy doing what you're doing, you know what? Just keep doing it. And I can't fix I don't think it's necessary. If these are the things that you think, I am not your man. I really can't help you. What I can help you with is understanding the possibility. And I hope today you've seen at least it's possible to work this way. I can help you in understanding the advantages of working this way. Maybe you didn't understand before, but I hope after today you do understand why it's so much more advantageous to work this way. And I can definitely help you become more efficient, much more productive working this way. And I can help you with your ergonomic operatory design. And after today's presentation, you will have a better understanding of how to design your operatory to take advantage of some of these skills. And most of all, I hope I can help you to understand why this isn't all that hard to do. It's actually easy to do. So these things I can fix. So let's actually go to the contrast and compare section of this presentation. If you go on the web and you do a Google search for endodontist office tour, you come up with over 1,000 hits where endodontists show their offices. And looking at these, it gives you a very good snapshot or profile of microscope use today in endodontic offices. If you restrict your search to only offices that claim to be microscopic, you get a very good understanding of how the microscope is being used today. So, first of all, you see a very odd mix of naked eye, loop, and microscope use in many of the offices. You see doctors standing with loops. Some of the operatories have microscopes, some don't. Some have microscopes where they're just using them as a light source. And others use them in some ops, but not other ops. So it's a very odd mix of 3 types of magnification. Some are using them at crazy angles like this, where it's really almost impossible to work. Other operatories show the doctor using loops with the assistant at crazy angles. So the image is one of kind of a confused use of microscopes, and some are obviously trying to do their best in using it, but struggling. So it's a very revealing look at how the microscope is actually used in the endodontic office today, with many doctors obviously using it in a combined way. They claim to be microscopic, but are probably using the microscope and also using loupes in the naked eye a lot as well. The most painful pictures, of course, are to observe the assistants in these terrible, contorted assisting positions that apparently the doctor is completely unaware of. There's a lot of class 5 twisting and bending motions that must be unbelievably tiring to spend the entire day in these positions. Many times the assistant is standing or their neck or back are in very uncomfortable positions. You see this a lot on the doctor's websites. So what you see is the microscope is not really fully integrated in many offices. Even in some very nicely designed and beautifully designed offices, the microscope is in some ops but not other ops. So they can't really be used in the universal way that we are suggesting it be used. Most ops also have an overhead light system, which is completely unnecessary unless you're doing implants. If you're using a microscope to do everything, you don't need an overhead light. I haven't had an overhead light in my operatory for 20 years. So the claims of expert use of the microscope, it's impossible to use a microscope well in these positions at 90 degrees to the patient's head. It is just very, very difficult. So these ergonomic positions with the microscope at extreme angles like this, pointed down, the patient at a 90-degree angle, or really the microscope here is in the way, so the dentist is actually working around the scope instead of through it. So in some offices, the microscope appears to be more of a prop or afterthought because of the way it is positioned in the op. You really couldn't use it very efficiently at all in this kind of an op. So it's almost there for appearance's sake. And some of these ops are so poorly designed for the use of the microscope that it's almost impossible to use one, even if you wanted to use one on every single patient. We don't have time today to go into a lot of the details of office design, but these are very poorly designed operatories for microscope use. The office design for microscope use is very, very specific, and it's very simple. So what can we infer from this? Well, I would say I think that most clinicians are earnestly trying to use a microscope. Obviously, some more than others. Almost none use it to do everything. Most seem to use it when they think they need it, and there is a very poor understanding of how to use it ergonomically, and certainly a very poor understanding of operatory design elements that are required for its highest use. And most importantly, it's clear that the microscope is not yet a foundational principle in most offices. It just seems to appear to be kind of like an adjunct to treatment. It's just another tool. So what can I do to maybe help you get over some of your resistance to these ideas? First, you need to understand what the argument actually is. The argument is not, I don't need a microscope to do these things. Of course you don't. But the argument is that by doing some things under the scope and other things without the scope, what happens to your efficiency? And the answer to that question is that your efficiency really goes down. So what you want to ask is a different question, and that is, how efficient could you become if you were able to do everything under the scope? And the answer to that question is, you become really, really efficient. So I have a few little helpful hints that may help you if you're designing your office, or maybe if you're just remodeling and want to have a microscope-centered practice. All of these issues about where to mount the scope, what the back wall looks like, where the plumbing goes, none of these questions can be answered without first understanding how you work. This is why the traditional kind of operatory designs are designed so poorly, because the people doing this don't really understand how microscopic endodontists work. Of course, how you work, that is the study of ergonomics, of time and motion. efficiency, health, balance. So to design an operatory properly, you really need to know how you work. So there are a couple of basic principles, and the first principle is circle of influence. You need to have everything you need within your circle of influence. And the guiding principle in an operatory is to have everything within your reach for both you and the assistant. So the placement of the assistant's monitor, of the back wall, of where the cart is, where the microscope is mounted, all of these things are actually very simple if you follow the principle of circle of influence. For example, in this speeded up video of us doing a case, it's very difficult. You don't even see what Joy is doing here. If we slow it up a bit, you get a much better sense of the circle of influence concept. She rotates in her chair. She doesn't twist or bend. She's always upright, always comfortable, as opposed to this design where the assistant actually here is standing and has to walk over to get something, and nothing is in her reach. It's going to be very difficult using a microscope efficiently with an operatory setup like this. So the practice model we've used, we've covered the classification of motion, the circle of influence principle, how important a patient chair is, and the back wall. It's absolutely critical. We won't have time to go over all of these issues, but the back wall is very, very important. Yet, in most commercial back walls, although very expensive, are not really designed well for microscopic endodontics. The good news is the back wall, according to a TDO design, is really, really simple and very inexpensive, actually. We use an IKEA design, or you can have your cabinet maker make it, but the wall shouldn't really cost you more than $3,000 or $4,000, and it's really kind of an ideal back wall for the assistant and the doctor. Now, I mentioned that there were certain things that were real impediments to trying to do everything under the scope. We've covered anesthesia a little bit, so I hope you can see that it's really easy to give anesthesia under the scope. The other things people struggle with is placement of the rubber dam and making the initial access in the tooth. And these are things that are easier done under the scope, but there are some techniques to it. So I thought I would cover a couple of them. We don't have time to do all of them, but let's talk about putting the rubber dam on and then you doing the initial access through the scope. So I think in attempting to place the rubber dam, what happens is a lot of endodontists try to use the scope to put it on, and they just get frustrated, and then they realize it's just easier to put the dam on without the scope. But actually, that's not true. It's actually easier and done far better under the scope, because you can really tell when the clamp is impinging on the soft tissue. So what is the real problem here? Well, the problem is that it's hard to see. And because your hand is in front of the objective lens and it's blocking what you need to see, and people get frustrated because they're working blind, and rule number one with the scope is you never work blind. You should never work blind with a scope. So all you really need to do is learn a few tricks. Learn to use the mirror, turn the patient's head. Usually the mirror goes in, and you use the mirror to really put the lingual jaws over first. Here you can see I'm looking in the mirror. I can see that the lingual jaws are appropriately placed on the upper back molar, and then you put the buccal jaws over. And all of this is done with mirrors. So the steps are take a mirror, position the clamp lingually, observe the clamp, and then put the buccal jaws over, and then put the dam on. So in real time, this is what it looks like. I take the mirror initially. Now I'm going to take that mirror and I'm going to look at the lingual jaws as I place the clamp. So here you can see I'm looking at the lingual jaws in the mirror. You're looking in the mirror here as you place. So you're not used to doing this with the mirror, but as soon as you get used to using the mirror, you'll find it's actually fairly easy. And you'll never impinge the soft tissue either, because you'll see it very easily. So here we go in, the clamp goes in, I put the mirror in, I'm checking the lingual jaws first. So my hand is not really in the way. Then I put the buckle jaws on, and then I invert the dam, and we're ready to go. So let's do another case, so you could get a sense of how the mirror is really used in this procedure. So we go in, my hand is blocking my view, but I put the mirror in, and I can see the lingual jaws, no problem. Then I put the mirror over on the buckle, and I can really examine the buckle placement of those jaws on the soft tissue. And then I simply put the dam on. And you're doing this all under the scope, no problem. So here's one start to finish. First, you get the mirror, then the rubber dam forceps. Look on the lingual. You can see that I've changed the mirror around. I seat the lingual jaws first, then the buckle. You'll notice I go back and forth to make sure no soft tissue has been impinged on. So this really is a very simple procedure once you get used to it. So you actually do it faster and you do it better. So now let's regroup a little bit and take another look at us working, speed it up. And you might notice some things this time that you didn't notice the last time. We're both completely upright posturally. We are very comfortable working. Neither one of us has any pain in our trapezius muscles or neck muscles, and we're able to really focus only on what we're doing. We're not interrupted by moving the scope, changing positions, taking the scope out, putting it back. You can see that Joy is actually doing most of the work here. I'm just basically doing class 1 and sometimes an occasional class 2 movement, and I'm really able to just focus on what it is that I do, which is the case at hand, and not have to really worry about anything else. So this is an extremely efficient way to work, especially when you consider that we're doing all of our record keeping as we are working, and we're not doing any record keeping afterward. And this is speeded up so you can get a sense of how much motion. This is actually packing the case. And if you just study my hands, you can see there's very little motion, very little stress involved, and I'm totally focused just on what I'm doing because I don't have to interrupt by moving the microscope. If I touch the microscope at all, it's just to change the magnification. I'm basically focusing with my knees. And this is like a little series from over a 15-year period, and you can see we haven't changed what we do very much at all. These are videos assembled over a 15-year period. So we've worked this way for almost 20 years, and it's just a very, very efficient way to work. So endodontists, they struggle with giving anesthesia under the scope. They struggle with placing the rubber dam. But what they struggle more than anything else with is making access with the microscope. And there's a couple of secrets here as well. Obviously, the assistant scope. The use of smaller mirrors can really help. Full disclosure here, EIE2 sells these mirrors. I don't care if you use our mirrors or anyone else's mirrors. The smaller mirrors really help, especially the 10 and 12 millimeter mirrors. And finally, move the mirror away. You've got a smaller mirror now. You can move it further away. That makes more room for your hand or your instruments or your handpiece. And you can make that mirror look huge because you've got a microscope. So you blow up the size of the smaller mirror and you can make it look like a 25 millimeter mirror. Here you can see the difference. Now in this case, Joy notices that I don't have room. She changes the mirror to a smaller mirror. I don't even have to ask for it. She already realizes it because she's at the scope with me and can see I'm struggling with space. And now I have enough room for the handpiece and the mirror, and I can see what I'm doing. So with the assistant at the scope, you can move the mirror further away. The assistant can position her suction so that your mirror doesn't get dirty. So you can drill almost continually on the tooth without having to change your mirror or wipe your mirror off. As you can see in this speeded up example, in this axis, the mirror is almost outside the bottom of the rubber dam frame. My assistant is suctioning. She can see exactly where to precisely precision the suction to minimize the water spray. So this is another advantage of having the assistant at the scope because the placement of the suction is so much better. I have not wiped a mirror in 20 years because I haven't needed to. If the mirror is dirty, Joyce just changes it immediately for me. Now you see the mirror is placed too close to the tooth. and you can see the mirror is being dirtied. And this is where endodontists have typically placed the mirror, close to the tooth. But if you can just learn to place the mirror away, you can avoid this problem completely. This is a case where we're trying to remove some silver cones using ultrasonic, and ordinarily the water would splash all over the place and you'd get your mirror dirty right away. But if you could learn to put your mirror further away, have the assistant at the scope placing the suction in exactly the correct position, you can learn to, whether you're drilling on a tooth, making an access, or taking silver points out. You can do this without dirtying your mirror very much at all. And it reduces the number of times you have to change your mirror. You don't need your assistant there constantly cleaning your mirror. You have very good control because there's no splash on the mirror at all. And I'm able to really remove all that buildup material around the silver cones and not really touch the silver cones very much since I don't want to break them off, and the mirror is completely clean the whole time. So in summary, what I'd like to get across today is, first of all, we do everything under the scope, and it's possible to do everything under the scope without a lot of effort on your part. All record keeping can be done contemporaneously while you do it. The vast majority of the record keeping can be done, and all reports can be completed before the patient leaves the office. So if you're able to understand that possibility and understand that the possibility is really the hard part, once you get over that hump and understand that this really is doable, then all you really need to do is figure out the details. And there's a lot of little tiny details here, yes, but if you pay attention to them, you can master these skills very easily. And it goes without saying that our model is a team model. And if you want to really have high accomplishment in this, then you're going to have talented people around you. People that will pay attention to all the little details and understand that mastering any art is a function of paying attention to those details. I love this saying from John Wooden: if you do enough small things right, big things can happen. And big things can happen in your practice if you pay attention to all these small details.